P&R with Adam R. Welcome to 3P&R. I'm your host, Adam R., and joining me again is Cheryl Costa. This episode is going to be speaking about Cheryl's book and some of her other enterprises. Cheryl, let's talk about your book, the name, and what it's about.
Well, it's not one book. It's 50 books.
50 books.
50 books. This is going to be something very unique. When we did all the data for our pink book, the UFO sightings desk reference, 2001 to 2020, we could analyze the country and the individual states. We could never go lower than the county level. Okay, because right. if we tried to, people are saying, why can't you print out the whole United States right down to the city level? And the book, we did a calculation on back in 2020 during the lockdown. Had nothing better to do, and we figured out it would be equivalent to about 3 or 4 Oxford dictionaries, about 6,500 pages.
Wow. I don't think people understand.
That's a foot and a half thick. That's a foot and a half thick.
Yeah, people don't get it. Like when you're breaking things down to the state and then the city and even smaller jurisdictions, that's insane data.
Well, so we decided to do an individual 50 individual state books. Okay. So, but to make it easy, otherwise we'd be here until they're ready to put me in the ground. Right. So we said, I took a lot of methods engineering and manufacturing classes a long time ago, as of course some stuff to do with my professional career. So when the idea got thrown around, I said, look, I think we could do this in a modular fashion. Okay. And so we wrote all the research papers for what we've done for the desk reference. So that was already ready, about 35, 40 pages worth.
Right.
Okay. But we'll give you an example. Ohio is going to be the first book. And that had a printout of 143 pages just for the chart, the tables that go from county to zip code to municipality, and then a listing of every shape that particular entity had for the 20 years.
That's a lot of data.
Yeah, it is. And, in your smaller burgs, it's barely a 1 or 2, 3 liner,
Right.
But you take a major city or something like that, or a major county of some sort, like Los Angeles County has more sightings than 39 individual states. It's going to be a big printout. And when you look at it, you'll see Los Angeles County, you'll see one of the prominent zip codes there. But there will be all the zip codes within that reported sightings for Los Angeles County and what shapes they saw and how many of them, what years. Not down to the date of them, but you'll get a true scale of how much stuff has gone on in 20 years in your local zip code or your local little burg,
Right.
And it's going to be pretty cool. So what we did was, the front part of a book is called a verso. That's that part that's got the 2 title pages and the copyright stuff and all that, right?
Right.
And that's called a verso. And because we're doing a series books, I don't know if you ever noticed, like if you read a mystery series by somebody who writes a lot of mystery books,
yeah,
you got your first title page and you open it up on the inside left-hand side, there is a list of all the books that he or she has published to date. Okay.
Right.
And then you got your other title page on the right-hand side, and you flip it open, and there's the copyright information, everything. And ours is extensive because we're dealing with data and all that stuff. And then that's what we call the verso package. It's about 4, maybe 5 pages. And then the next section of the book is usually you're going to have in that 5th page is going to be a table of contents. Okay.
Right.
But then I can make that one module by itself, one PDF module by itself. Then I took all of the essays. The only thing we did, okay, we had all the essays from the Pink Book, the desk reference book, but we had different people do our two opening forwards. David Marler did one of the forwards, and Erica Lukes did the other one. Okay,
Right.
and then Linda wrote a preface as the publisher. Okay, I wrote an introduction, and then after that, it's followed by all the research essays we did back with the desk reference book. All of that gets encapsulated up into one PDF. Okay, and then we have the part that's specific to the state. It's got a couple of cover sheets. It's got the whole printout of the stuff, and then it's got like a summary in the beginning of it with a couple of charts and graphs for what their yearly average, monthly average, that kind of stuff is. And then that is the specific stuff for that state. And in this case, we'll say Ohio. It's about 145 pages or so. We can't get to California. It's going to be upwards of
because I see a book
500.
now. It's titled the UFO Beat: The New York Skies.
No, UFO Beat was all my columns.
Gotcha.
Okay, this new book is called.
I'm actually going to order that. It looks interesting.
Oh, it is. It's all 238 articles that I wrote over 7 years.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to order that, 'cause that appeals to me. Right? It looks like
It's
specified
the
data.
stories. I mean, all our analysis books are charts, graphs, and tables, and a lot of research gobbledygook. Okay, but if you truly want to just read stories, and actually, it's a good snapshot from 2003 to 2019 of where the UFO community was, because there's regular dialogue in there about advocating for disclosure and things like this. I mean, I did an open letter at one point. I think it was in 2017. I think I did a open letter to the New York State congressional delegation. That means the 2 senators and all of our congressmen. And said, why aren't you, no one of you has to advocate and look like an idiot. If the whole delegation stands up and said, we need congressional hearings, people would listen.
Agreed. You're right about one thing. There is a pre-2017 and a post-2017 as far as ufology goes. I mean, there's a decisive difference between the two. There's, 2017, the government, I'm not going to say leaked, but released information on UFOs, both their video and their data. What they could give.
2017 anyway. was a mini disclosure year.
Right.
Now, a lot of people knee-jerk and say it was December 15th to 16th, whatever, New York Times, ATIP article.
Right, however they want to say it. Because
it actually started in February. With the Obama era release of material through the National Archives, downgraded CIA stuff that was in there with a whole bunch of like Kissinger stuff from the Nixon administration.
Oh, I see.
Okay. And that was revealing stuff. I downloaded a lot of those PDFs, and I know the New York Times did too, because Ralph Blumenthal told me they did. And for years, the CIA said, "Oh, we don't research UFOs. That's silliness, Right. But here they were. Here's 2 guys from the OSI, which is the Office of Scientific Investigation at CIA, in 1949, 1950, pulling their hair out, trying to figure out how come there was a peak in the middle of the summertime.
Hey, Cheryl, I got a question.
Sure.
I covered this last night with another guest. I wasn't clear on it. Did the CIA absorb the OSI?
I don't know that.
I don't
I always
either.
thought that they were a branch of the CIA.
Right, maybe separate entities, but I don't hear OSI thrown around a lot anymore. It seems to be periods like the gentleman I had on yesterday. His experiences were in the 60s, and he kept referencing the OSI. And in my mind, I'm like, I don't hear that very often today. I mean, so I often wonder, did just CIA absorb all of it?
I think so. I think they were always just an arm of them to begin with. So then Linda and I came out with our first data book in April of 2017. The New York Times made a big deal of it.
Huh.
And then in December, I mean, people think, well, yeah, you got an article in the New York Times. Most people don't understand. An article done in Science magazine in a world newspaper of record is a big deal.
Right.
They treated it sanely. They said, this is primary research. This is good. The first day it showed up on their website. The second day it was in print. And that morning, on the day it was in print, 8:30 in the morning, my phone started ringing. In the offices of Syracuse New Times, phones started ringing. And none of us, our phones did not stop ringing until like 10:30 that night. We were called by news directors and reporters all over the world.
Right, because your data was linking to something that's just been put out publicly.
Well, that, and as the New York Times made a case about, it says, here was some scientific research by, especially a couple of old ladies in Syracuse, that said, here are the numbers. Here is the statistics. Even Project Blue Book didn't do this.
Right.
Okay. Instead of just telling stories. Now, Joe saw this. Susie saw that.
Now, there's another book I want to discuss pretty straight away before we get back into data. Magical Musing of a Rogue Witch.
Oh, my Wicker Priestess retirement book.
Right. Yeah, the title catches my eye, right? And
okay.
And you have several books. I mean, several books. True Magic and some of the other. So
True Magic's one of my one-act plays.
Right. I'm seeing a handful. So I'm gonna have to. You're gonna keep me busy for some months. I'm seeing.
Yeah. Well, ask me about the Rogue Witch one.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Rogue Witch. What does that entail? What is that, like a how-to book, or is that your personal experiences?
A little bit of both. In fact, my writing professor from college read it, and she demanded a signed copy. I wasn't under her tutelage since 2014, but she keeps in touch with me. And she says, I think it's an autobiography, at least from the magical side of your life.
Right.
All right. Some lineages of Wicca, and maybe some of the other traditions as well, I'm not positive, but I know in Wicca, some of the lineages, not all, say if you've had a life in magic, when you get up to around retirement age, publish a book. It can be, I've seen people publish, excuse the expression, the Betty Crocker book of magical spells. That kind of thing. Yeah. Some of them wrote the history of their coven. Some of them wrote their own history in magic, like an autobiography or memoir, that type of thing. And my first attempt at this was in around 2003 time frame. I wrote this book of what I called my book of magic. And my adult daughter, who's a magical adept in her own right, I didn't train her. I gave her the basics, but other more advanced teachers, I called them up and said, I got a student for you if you're willing to take her on,
right.
Because she didn't want to learn from me, and which was fine. And she looked at it and says, you can't publish this. And I said, why? And she said, well, you're handing out loaded shotguns to third graders. She says, you've made the magic so simple.
So here's a key element.
Well, the bottom line was I put it on the shelf, let it chill in the back of my mind for a while, came back about a year later, took it off the shelf, dusted it off, sat down and read it one afternoon, took it outside to the barbecue pit, sprayed lighter fluid on it, and burnt the whole manuscript.
Huh.
All right. So formally getting ready to retire last year. Okay. Retired in 2021. Okay. Taught my last class in 2021. I've always taught live classes in person. Okay, most witches do that. But 2020, 2021, we were forced, if we were going to carry on as usual, we had to start using tools like Zoom and things like that to teach. And this was a challenge for me because I was not used to doing that kind of thing. Oh, I'm used to doing talk shows and stuff, but I wasn't used to the idea of carrying on a college level lecture about metaphysics.
Right.
So we did some of it on Facebook. We did some of it on Zoom. And I started writing a series of essays. that would normally accumulate, that would represent maybe a 3-hour talk one Monday night a month or something like that. Okay. And when I retired, I started looking through these essays and said, this is the foundation for a book. These are the workings of what a class took. My last class was like. Okay.
Right.
So I did that, and I pulled them out. I had to write a few what I call glue essays. There were some holes in there someplace, So I put them all together, organized it, started proofing it and everything, and it started looking like a good deal. So, and then I had to write some narrative as to how I got into magic and why am I. There was like 3 titles considered at one point. One title was Ravings of a Mad Witch. That kind of thing,
Right.
And basically we got it throttled down to something a little bit more sane. And it's basically Magical Musings of a Rogue Witch. The idea behind it was in the book, we literally say, consider these talks more like you're sitting down with me over a cup of tea some afternoon, and we're having a really deep shop talk conversation about real magic.
Right.
And that was the approach. And that's what the approach of the book is. And then I also, where's the rogue come from? I was always an outsider. 30 years ago, when I produced a television program in 1991, people say to me, how did you come out about witchcraft publicly? The front page of the New York Washington Post Metro section, the first sentence in a thing, Cheryl Costa is a computer consultant for a major 500 company, and she is a card-carrying witch. That was the first line on the front page of the Metro section of the Washington Post in June 18th, 1991.
Wow. That's
coming out, okay? The next coming out that went along with that is after that article appeared, Larry King had us on, Entertainment Tonight had us on. Me and the host of the show did upwards of 100 interviews over the next 18 months with global and domestic press and media. Changing the image of witchcraft.
Well, if you think about it, and I've read it, so prior to, I read an article, and there are some people in very, very high-level colleges, I won't say their names, but they're doing research to figure out the lines between alchemy, magic, and science. Obviously, alchemy later on becomes chemistry. Well, not all of it anyway, but so they want to figure out, are there blurred lines there, where I think magic... some people tend to believe it fully being a verbal spiritual thing. And I feel like magic is very much a verbal spiritual thing, where science is they're trying to prove or disprove something based on patterns and how often it happens. And in other words, if you light a match and throw it into this liquid on the ground, and if the liquid lights fire 9 out of 10 times, it becomes science that's going to happen. If it doesn't, then it's science that it doesn't. So with magic, this is the biggest question. So I hold little polls with small circles of people. Okay. Biggest question: how to manifest luck. That's all. Out of everything I heard, I expected to hear, how do I become healthy? Maybe I could be smarter. Nothing to do that would cause them to have a good outcome. They want to know, how do I manifest magic? Or luck. That's their primary focus.
Okay, well, luck's a pretty broad term.
Right.
Okay. That's like for asking for unlimited bounty, if you know what I'm saying.
Right.
Programs like Bewitched back in the 60s. A lot of people think I wiggle my nose and supper appears. It doesn't work like that.
Right.
But what it really amounts to, and our culture could use a lot more of this, is the person who is the witch has to learn to quiet their mind. And basically what we do in a one-liner, this is the log line if you're making a movie, okay? We turn thought into form.
Interesting.
Okay, now let's take the Buddhist view. There is emptiness, which is the great potential for all possibilities. And given thought, focused thought, makes form arise out of the ultimate potential of that emptiness.
Cheryl, close to that. So I play pool, And part of playing pool is a pre-shot routine. And that's when you're approaching the table, you're visualizing your shot. And while you're visualizing your shot, you're supposed to project in your mind, like visualize it, how it goes down and the outcome. Like,
Thank you.
And so it's the same kind of concept. You're manifesting the outcome before it even happens. And then you get down on the table and shoot. And if you stay focused, it'll actually happen the way you pictured it in your mind.
Talk to martial arts people. It's about knowing where the guy's going to be.
Right.
KNOW, know. And it's also about being focused and clear, have a clarity in your mind, not distracted by other stuff, to be able to point and make those decisions like you just talked about with that pool cue.
Right. And that also applies to to people who shoot guns professionally. It's visualizing the shot before you even take the shot.
You become the gun.
Right.
You become the gun. Yes.
So, I mean, it's when you said that a moment ago, that clicked with me, right? Because it's not, this isn't just alone about magic. Like, I have a lot of traffic in my mind.
I get people call me all the time. Oh, you must be calling up devils. And I said, no, we don't.
It's conjuring a place of mind, a psychological ability.
The universe is full of potential.
Right.
If someone asks me if I'm coming out of meditation, they say, so what was your meditation about? I am pregnant with universes.
Huh.
That is a statement of saying I am connected to all things, everywhere, every when.
It makes me...
Pardon me?
It makes me curious now because, again, when you said that, it's visualizing and bringing something to fruition. And now it's maybe my approach to everything needs to be a little more clear-minded and subtle before doing so. I got to visualize the outcome.
Think about somebody who's a painter or a sculptor.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, Michelangelo even said, how do you know how to make it look like a guy? He said, actually, it looks like a guy inside. I just have to kind of dig it out.
Interesting. You're right, because to paint and
any
sculpt,
painter who visualizes it in their head, talk to a musician who's a composer. They hear the music in their head, then they write it down.
That's you know what, you're right. 'Cause I play guitar and I never even thought of that before.
This is a creative art.
Yep. So I get it. That makes sense to me because I used to hear notes in my head and get out of bed and go play it on the guitar. Oh, I got to play this. I remember doing that. So this computes to me.
So the purpose of the book is I decided to teach the high physics, and you're going to love this, the high physics of magic. Because anybody who works with magic at a more mature, what I'm going to call a more mature level, other than just, mixing some herbs together and lighting a few candles and chanting.
And real quick to clear up so people listening realize, we're not talking about the magic you see on TV. Those are illusions.
No.
Right. That's an illusion
we're talking about, sorcerer's apprentice kind of magic.
Right.
Okay. In fact, I've got a class right now of 8 sorcerer's apprentices right now. And all of them came to the table. I had 25 people apply for the class, and I ended up taking 8. And all of them have already had a grounding in it.
Right.
Or a certain type of spiritual calling, which told me off the bat, they're grounded in it and they just don't know it yet. That type of thing.
Right.
And so I teach that, and it's a high form, it's a high form magic class. I've only taught it once. This is the second time in 20 years that I'm teaching it at this level. It's an apprenticeship. I can't teach it over Zoom. This is a hands-on 2 Monday nights a month with homework, and it's, but the hardest part of some of this is, it's not just sitting down, learning to do the magic. It's understanding that to do anything, pick an athlete, pick a musician, whatever, you have to get it in your head. You can do this thing, or that you're going to do this thing.
That's true. Because when you have a lot of mental traffic, it could prevent you from being successful at anything.
Yes. Thank you. And our whole Western culture seems totally geared up to keep us distracted. You can't walk into a restaurant anymore without 5 TV screens blaring some sports channel. You got stuff coming through your phone constantly.
Right.
And I I have a requirement in my class. Your phone, unless you're like part of the National Security Service or you're on call from a fire department, I want that phone on airplane mode when you walk in.
Right. Yeah, because it's a disruption in the energy, let alone anything else. Right? Because
that too, but
yeah.
I don't want them distracting. I don't want them pulling that phone up when they're supposed to be sitting there in the middle of the floor meditating.
Right.
I used to tell a story about this when I was a Buddhist monastic. I was an ordained, for your audience, I was an ordained Buddhist nun. I took a 7-year sabbatical, and I went and I lived in an Orthodox Tibetan Buddhist monastery in the DC area.
I applaud that.
Tibet. And in the buzz cut, the Navy haircut, as they say, and dressed like the Dalai Lama every day at Lockheed Martin headquarters.
I applaud that. I'll tell you why, Cheryl. There's a guy, and you have to do it. I'll tell you why. There's a guy who studies religion, very peaceful man. And I think if everyone studied all religions, they'd find some commonality there. And then I think it would separate the anxiety of like, whose God's better. At the end of the day, it's an energy that's bigger than all of us. That's greater than anything any words or vocabulary we put in a book. That energy is greater than that. Yeah, we apply the names, we apply the rules. It's humans. We do that.
I didn't seek the Buddhist out directly.
Right.
I had been a Wicked priestess at that point. This was in 1994. I had produced my television program from 1991 to late 1992.
Right.
Okay, we were supposed to only do 6 episodes because that's the only contract they would give us for that cable station. And then we drew the world media came raining down upon the station. You don't think that wasn't a piece of magic?
Yeah.
The ritual to do that was done by me and the host of the show in her backyard about 2 months before till the show came out. And then one day, the guy, senior producer at the TV station, actually, called me up and he says, "Cheryl, there was a 300-word story about your show. We weren't even on the air yet on the Associated Press." I said, "Did they say nice things?" He says, "Yeah, they did." I said, "Did we get any press ink?" And he said, "No, not yet." But he says CBS and ABC News are sitting in the lobby and they want to talk to your witches.
Huh.
It's like that old joke, you're going to have an interesting day when 60 Minutes is sitting in the lobby.
Yeah, exactly. What year is this again?
1991, May 1991.
Okay, so yeah, it caught their interest, whatever it was.
Yes, it did, and it took off an average of 8 phone calls a workday for the next 8 weeks from some news organization someplace. And because DC was in basically the heart of the Western world, all the European countries, Asian countries had bureaus there. So it was just an easy matter to contact us. We were right there in the Delmarva area. We were right there in the DC Beltway area. And so we were able to accommodate. In fact, we're informally, I can tell you this story. I had a major newspaper reporter who had done a story about us anyway. He called me up. He said, "You guys know," this is about 6 months after we were on the air. And he says, you guys caused the riot in Rome?"
Wow.
I said, "We did? We're a $75 a week television program, and you're telling me we caused a riot in Rome?" "Well, what happened was," he says, "well, you guys were interviewed by Italian people, right?" And I said, "Yeah." "And Italian look, right?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Both of those hit the newsstands 2 weeks ago." I said, "Okay." The same week, Rome Channel 4, I know you talked to them. I said, "Well, we talked to the Bureau here." He said, "Okay." They ran their piece in that 6 to 7 o'clock hour before prime time, the same week that those magazine articles hit the newsstands. It ran for an hour during that window of time after supper. All these women started coming out of the high-rise apartments. The poor people live in high-rises in Rome. And all these women started coming out of the high rises and they started marching through the alleys, chanting, and more women were coming out and joining them. And he told me, he says, when they got to the gates of the Vatican, which were closed, they were 3,000, roughly 3,000 strong, chanting in Italian, "We are the witches, we have returned." And our magazine articles and that TV news piece in Rome instigated it.
Yeah, and in Rome, that's the heart of Catholicism. They probably killed all those people. I mean, you're talking about
there was the burning times. They estimated we had 1 million people killed. So
yeah, because once upon a time, to prove you weren't a witch, they'd strap concrete to your legs, throw you in a lake.
Ridiculous stuff. Yes. Or they just flat wrapped you up in some stuff and burned you on a stake.
Right. And if you survived it, you were a witch. And if you didn't survive it, you were a person. But unfortunately, we had to find out. It's terrible.
Well, yeah, it was a catch-22. It was more political, and it was women were living longer than the men in those days. They still do.
Yeah.
So the church wanted to take their property. So you accuse them of being a witch, and the witch hunters would come from the Inquisition and take them and kill them, and then the church got to keep their whatever little bit of wealth they had, and of course the land, which was much more valuable.
Yeah, not only that, but even back then when they had plagues, if you taught someone how to use proper hygiene, you were definitely a witch. How do you know this? Because
yeah. Well, let's go back to the magic minute.
Yeah.
Okay. The idea was, a lot of people see from the movies, they put all this. There's 500 years of Catholic rhetoric about, it's the work of the devil, it's this, it's that, and it's not. Okay. There is an herbalism side to it, and there's a lot of books out there about Wicca that are strictly herbalism. Okay. I'm not an herbalist, and I'm not an alchemist.
Right.
Okay. I'm what you'd probably call a magical physicist. Okay. Now, I tell people they got to learn to quiet their mind, learn to meditate. They want to study with me. Well, they say, well, how come other witches don't do that? I says, well, they do in a way, because they've either got a crystal ball, or they've got a crystal ball, or they have a candle. They'll have a candle going. That candle is not lit there for the ambiance. The candle is lit there to focus on. And It kind of hypnotizes you and gets you in the zone. And then if you did the stuff with the herbs, we have a joke in craft that people keep a lot of little, the old baby food bottles.
Yeah.
You stuff the little bottles with the herbs and a little note that says what your wish is.
Okay? Right.
And so there's the thing, somebody says, "Hey, I'm a broom-toting, bottle stuffing witch." That's what they mean.
Huh.
Okay. And the idea behind it is you put that note in there as a manifest, and all the herbs and things you put in that bottle are symbology. So when somebody tells me, "Oh, hey, my great aunt died and she has this 100-year-old book about magic," it's probably useless to you, because the stuff they said in the spell isn't even in a language, English language we would understand, for one, and two, the symbolism isn't there that you would understand. So it's useless to you. Okay. People, what we see in the movies, people finding these grand old spells, read this spell, and it's great verbiage, and it makes for great drama and everything, but it's actually useless from a magical standpoint, because the mechanism, let's use almost like Christian symbology here. We have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, right?
Right.
But if you talk to anybody who knows anything about the religion, all communications with the divine happen through the Holy Ghost. Whenever great things happen to the apostles, they're pictured in paintings with these little yads of little burst of fire hanging over their head. That's the symbol for the Holy Ghost, right? Well, in witchcraft, it's what we call the younger self. Okay? That part is that tiny spark of life that we all have in us that is connected to everything, everywhere, everywhen. Now, when we talk UFO stuff, we are connected to everything, everywhere, everywhen. Yes, including those aliens on Zeta Reticuli, or wherever the hell they come from.
Right.
We're connected to them. Every atom in our body is connected to every atom, everywhere, everywhen.
Right. And by the way, that's proven in science. So if anyone calls it a question,
quantum entanglement.
Right.
Now, I want you to think of something. Take your two little fingers and hook them together.
Right.
Okay. Now that's quantum entanglement, the way the English language describes it.
Right.
Okay. Now take your two hands, grab each of your wrists with each of your hands, and hold yourself like that, like you're going to haul somebody up off the edge of a cliff. Okay.
Right.
That kind of thing. That's the German word for entanglement.
So it's subtle differences that cause a bit of a divide.
Well, that's a big difference because everybody has that little finger to finger kind of connection with everything, every place. But if you put a focused intention on
I see what you mean. Okay,
you can strengthen that bond in the connection. Okay. And it can go in this context, it transcends distance, it transcends time. Okay.
Right.
So the whole deal with all this is again, as I say, really serious magic is high physics, is a form of high physics. And I would say, people say, well, if it was real, more people would be doing it. I said, no, let me tell you this. They did a survey a number of years ago. A couple of very prominent teachers in the craft community did a survey, and of hundreds and hundreds of students that had been in the craft more than 5 or 10 years. Most of them were in the sciences. Scientists don't do something unless it works.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I come from that high tech background as well. Okay. So the bottom line is magical physics works. It's just, it doesn't work. And I talk about this in the book. It's not like the skeptics come to us. We have our own form of skeptics. Like the UFO people have skeptics. We have our skeptics. And they come, well, anybody should be able to repeat your experiment. I said, well, not even all scientific experiments are repeatable.
That's true. And if they want to, so when a skeptic says anyone should be able to repeat what you're doing, well, here's an example. If that's the case, there's athletes, and I referenced this show on Netflix a lot. It's called The Last Dance, and it's about Michael Jordan and 90s Bulls. If you listen to Michael Jordan and the things he says and the things people say about him, he's in his mind manifesting reasons to have what he calls a fire in the gut to play better. There's an instance where he literally fabricated that one other player said something, oh, nice game. And he got that in his head and it helped him go. So at the end of the day, why can't they repeat it? Because they're not going to the same level of focus and meditation you're going. It's not the same thing. You can't just go in there and light the match and hope for the flame.
You put your finger right on it because, I never get 2 loaves. I teach my students to make bread.
Right.
Okay. If they're challenged by making a little loaf of white bread, then they're not cut out for magic.
Right. It's a lot of focus.
It's a lot of focus. It's a lot of exactness with measurements and attentiveness to temperatures and time and all kinds of stuff. Okay. And they think it's just, dressing up in robes, lighting a few candles and having a ton of crystals on their altar. It doesn't work that way. That's the popular, that's the popular trappings aspect that the vendors put in front of you. And I've got at least one review of my book that said, I've got 20 books on my shelf and Cheryl condensed it down to 140 pages.
Huh.
I went out and I said, I'm only going to talk about the magical physics and the practicalities of doing this. I'm going to teach you how it works. Okay. If you do the things I tell you about here, you'll be able to do it someday. Okay. But you have to keep up. It's not like you do it tomorrow. And it's not like you're going to snap your fingers and you're going to get a new bicycle. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
But you can set the causes in motion for these things.
Maybe people should view this as it's like a formula. If you have a missing part to a formula, you're not going to have the outcome desired.
That's true. But let's look at it further. Okay. A lot of people get into magic because not so much they had some great experience. Somebody took them to a fairy circle. They took them to a summer camp thing with the witches or something like that. No, a lot of people find themselves cornered with something they can't manage in life. Okay. And then somebody gets a hot idea. Well, maybe we should go to the bookstore and get a book on magic. Maybe we can cast a spell on them. And, that guy to beat your kid up or what, whatever it may be.
Right.
Okay. And unfortunately, most of the time people are usually trying to get back at an ex or their boss or something like that, and that's not what we're talking about here. Yeah, you could flatten them if you wanted to, but the karmic bite back on that is bad. Now, there's people online. You go online, there's tons of people saying, especially on Facebook, they'll say, some of the administrators for some of the groups on Facebook, oh, there's no such thing as magical blowback. I beg to differ with them.
Yeah, it's like our universe. There's definitely a yin and yang in the universe. There's balance in the universe. And if you do something to counter the balance in a probably an unnecessary or angry manner, there is going to be a blowback. There has to be. There's blowback in everything we see in life, physics, and every dimension we can imagine. There's always a blowback.
If you accept that there is blowback, okay, whether you do it good or do it bad, then you've understood a very simple principle of magic. Make a note of this. Contagion magic. Make sure I talk about this. Okay. All right. So let's talk about this blowback thing. Now, I teach my students, and this is the other thing. I'm going to read you the bio. Silver Raven Wolf is a very, very prominent solitary witch practitioner and author. Okay. Bright, vivacious, honest, humorous. I've known Cheryl for over 30 years, and she never disappoints. This masterpiece, Magickal Musings of a Rogue Witch, is no exception. Her delivery is point on, filled with wisdom and plain truth, laced with a twinkle only Cheryl can produce. This book will be required reading for all my students. Another author is saying, approaching magic and witchcraft from a reverent but common sense perspective, Miss Costa takes us back to square one of magical theory and lays down a new roadmap for how to accomplish it. Okay, so basically I took them all back and they say all the dressing up, all the candles, all the crystals, all the herbs, all that stuff are theater props.
Right.
Okay, to help you get your mindset into now it's time to do magic. It's like the idea the guy that's got the model train set. You're not really playing with your model train set unless you've got that scarf around your neck and that train master's hat on.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Now it's time to be an engineer, And
that can be said in a lot of things. It's what we call a ritual to, like, in other words, people have rituals before they go bowling.
It's a ritual mindset.
Right. And so you're basically telling your brain, hey, it's game time and let's get ready. And it makes sense because listen, for me to go to bed at night, I have a playlist starting with documentaries and, music in 432 hertz to relax the mind. I have to have my tea about exactly an hour before bed. So I'm spot on with that kind of ritual. And even me for shooting pool. When I shoot pool, I have my ritual. I have today's pool. So I know I got to eat at this hour. I take these supplements at that hour. Then I have this amount of time to practice. Then it's game time. So I get that completely.
Well, so that's part of this that I try to get across to students is we don't run around. People think I saw one book over at Barnes and Noble and I opened it up, a little book about craft, and I opened it and it's like the second chapter in said the first thing you got to really have a handle on is having good eye makeup if you're going to do witchcraft. I'm going, oh my God, that's so far off. But in a way, maybe it isn't, and maybe it isn't. I think it's awfully trivial. But the idea was, I tell my students, I don't want to see you walking around dressed up like a witch every time you come to class.
Right.
Keep those clothes, keep those garments special. You only wear them when you're doing magical work. You need the cues, and if you wear it around all the time, then they're not special.
Yeah, I could agree with that too, because this is going to sound really strange, but when I want to, so people listening, when I start thinking about what do I want to talk about a podcast, what kind of subject do I want to look into, I wear a certain pair of slippers. It sounds crazy, right?
Works for me.
Yeah, because for me, it's a ritual. Well, one, it's good for your back. I found this because they're really good for your back. And two, and when you walk on them, you feel like you're not walking anything. So I said, well, because I pace a lot when I think, right? And so I would wear those. So I associate those with, so whenever I put them on, I associate it with I'm going into deep thought and research. So I get it. I get everything you're saying makes sense to me. you know?
Let me talk about the best spell you can do.
Okay. Okay.
The best spell you can do is first take yourself out of the equation and do it for everybody but yourself. Everybody comes into magic. Oh, I want to use it to get a new car or get a new bicycle or a surfboard or a skateboard or, people, the skeptics say, well, if you're such a good witch, why aren't you rich?
It's not how it works.
if you're doing craft the correct way and you're living it as a lifestyle, and I tell people it's an art, a science, and lifestyle. If you're living the lifestyle correctly, in a way, you're sort of like a monk, okay, or a nun, but you're not doing it the way we see, the Christians doing it or the Buddhists doing it, okay?
Right.
When I first got in the monastery, I was probably the flunkiest novice they had in the place, okay? And the monks and nuns didn't give me the time of day most of the time. Okay. They might say the lunch I made for them in the cafeteria at the monastery was good if they liked it. Okay. But they didn't give me the time of day. Okay. Until one day, it was, 1997, it was an El Nino year. It was like in the DC area. It was like somebody turned on a faucet and just left it on for 4 months.
Right.
Okay. It rained every day, solid almost. And we were trying to do a big fire ritual. This was an offering to burn karma. Okay. Very similar what a lot of American witches do. In fact, there was another high priestess that was on sabbatical with me, actually 2 other ones. And we used to sit down with all the Tibetan books and go through their rituals and figure out, because we knew the mechanics, we would sit there and dissect with the ritual. Okay, this is their protectors, this is that, and we'd figure out what they were doing in their mechanics. Okay.
Right.
But they were going to do this big fire ritual. And the fire ritual was to help burn the karma for a particular historical figure. I can't get into it. There's confidentiality issues.
Right.
So it's pouring down rain like somebody turned on a big faucet. Senior nun goes up to the visiting lama and says, we can't start the big fire in the big fire pit because it's pouring down rain. We could maintain a fire if it could stop for 25 or 30 minutes while we can get a good roaring fire going out there in the fire pit. We're not talking backyard grill. We're talking a fire pit that's maybe 8 feet by 8 feet. Okay.
Right.
Concrete, put logs in it and everything. And the Lama looked at him and says, my Buddhist name is Tashi. It means auspicious. And he said, Ani means auntie or nun in Tibetan. So go find Ani Tashi, the novice. She knows how to turn off the rain. And this nun came down to me and says, the Lama would like you to turn off the rain. She looked at me kind of a wrinkled nose. Says, he says you should be able to turn off the rain for 25, 30 minutes so we can get a fire started for the fire ritual. I said, okay, can you go get me a bowl of rice? And I walked into the gift shop there at the temple and I borrowed a big Tibetan horn, one of these big shell horn things. And
right.
This little old lady in her nun gear comes out there with a big umbrella, stands out there in the yard, pouring down rain. It's like a monsoon outside. And I'm out there, I'm blowing the horn, I'm making offerings with the rice, I'm doing chanting my little thing. And a hole opens up in the clouds above the temple area, and we can see clear sky, twilight sky and stars. And then about 30 minutes later, it closed up and it started raining again. But by this time, they had this huge roaring fire out there. Okay. This happened twice while it was there. The first time, though, I made a mistake, and you don't tell the rain divas and spirits that it's okay to do whatever they want when they're done. You just tell them go back to your normal rain. No, I said no, do whatever you want. So when the rain started in, suddenly we started getting thunder. And we're in there doing the ritual. There's about 30 of us in there, monks and nuns doing the ritual. And the nun who I told you was another witch,
Yeah.
At one point, we had a really big clap of thunder, and the lightning was weird. And she nudged me and said, "What did you do?" I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "I've never seen green lightning before." And it happened again. She says, "Cheryl, I have never seen purple lightning before. What did you do?" And, and I screwed up, but I've never made that mistake since. But the bottom line is, a Native American medicine guy who knows me called me up. He says, "Were you over at the temple last night?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "I've never seen purple and green lightning before. Come on over. Let's have a talk." That kind of thing. You're always a student. That's the other thing. You can't get arrogant. I'm a senior queen priestess, but I'm still a student. You have to always keep a mindset that you're still learning. You don't know it all.
I say that often. When I hear people use words like expert, I always tell people you could say you specialize because that's the focus of your study, but expert's dangerous business. I always say I'm a student to it. Everything I do, no matter how long I've been shooting pool, no matter how long I've been playing guitar, I'm still a student. I'm always going to learn something.
When it brings humility to the table, for one. But the true definition of an expert is somebody who's made all the mistakes.
True. Yeah.
When you think about it.
Yeah. I mean, I had a guy, I was doing some off podcast interviews, and this guy told me he was an expert on Bigfoot. I was like, "How are you an expert?" He goes, "Well, do you have samples? Is there one in a cage somewhere? I mean, did you study it for years? I'm confused." He goes, "Well, I track them." I'm like, "Well, just say you're a specialist in tracking them. There's no harm in that, When you say expert, you back yourself into a corner, because God forbid, and this happens to me often, you'll be really good at doing something, and someone will come along and show you something you haven't seen before, and now, well, I thought you were the expert. I never use that word. That's dangerous business saying that. Professional.
When I talk about the UFO stuff, I simply, if I do use the term with non-UFO people, I say I'm an expert in UFO statistics.
Right. It's your expertise.
Because otherwise, if you say you're an expert in UFOs, they start coming back. Well, what about element 115? What about this? What about that?
Right.
And I just say, hey, I do statistical work with the sighting numbers. I can't tell you much more than that.
That's exactly. And, in that same kind of phrasing, that mindset is why you have large religions like Catholicism that look at Wicca as like, oh, it's evil, because they lack the ability to learn new shit. They're very complacent what it is that they read in their literature. And what happens when they read something of Wicca, like, well, that makes sense. And it's lines up kind of like with something from one of our rituals, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, they have a tendency to lock themselves in with canon.
Right. Yes.
Yes. And a true practitioner does their best not to become orthodox in anything, rigid and everything. Say, this is the way it is. This is the only way we're ever going to do it. No. Especially in magic. There are fundamentals that are rigid. Okay. But how you approach getting yourself in the right mindset and executing it.
Right.
When I wrote the book, somebody asked me, says, I talked about protection. Okay. And I said, look, it's not so much I can give you a good protection spell, or there's a good book out there about protection spells. No, remember the basics here. Always go back to, what was it the fencing instructor used to tell me in college? Go back to the fundamentals.
Yeah. Okay. Cheryl, again, to agree with you, in pool, I took 3 years away from pool, came back. And, prior to shooting or before the break, I shot pretty well. Then I come back and it's, it's not, you know what you want to do and you can do, but you're not doing it. And then there's exactly that. It's time to go back to the fundamentals. You got to start over. All right. Square one.
Yeah. So I always tell them, remember, we're in the business of turning thought into form. Right. So if you want to do folk magic protection, okay, put a little trail of salt around the perimeter of your bedroom. Okay, fine. That works. Okay. But there's other ways you can do it. For me, I've always just I took a lesson from Star Trek. I wrap myself in shields.
Right.
Okay. And when I do meditation exercises, I do meditation every day, but about once a week when I do my meditation, I'll just reinforce the wrappings of shields. I don't put any attack magic in them. Like some people want to make it like barbed wire, touch my shields, you're going to get bit, No. Just protect yourself. Just protect yourself. Don't worry about doing attack magic. Okay. And, just protect yourself. That's all you have to do. You don't have to retaliate. You don't have to be offensive.
Right. Just enough to keep yourself protected and aware.
That's it. That's it. So I tell people, we turn thought into form. Think about how you could wrap yourself, even if it's visualizing you built yourself a magical brick wall around yourself. Hey, that works. However you can visualize this. Do you have a magic cloak that nobody can see, kind of like Harry Potter's invisibility cloak that gives you protection? Sure. Visualize that and it's there.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I want to put this out there, because someone in one of the circles I was speaking to, when I told them, I was like, I'm going to look into this subject, they're like, well, that's the devil's work. I mean, you ever see anyone perform magic and actually get rich? I'm like, how often do you pray to your God when you need help for bills or you're in downtime, right? It's the difference there is you're asking a higher entity to help you, where this is you're doing it. You're getting involved. You're clearing your mind. You're focusing. You're visualizing the outcome, right? You're going to push yourself to have success and wealth and health and luck, versus, hey, God, I need some money. I'm in a spot here.
The gods will laugh at you.
Right. Because to them, what is that to them? That when the creation of the universe, what's money? Currency? I don't even understand this. Go grow food. Go fish.
Okay. I'm a priestess of Isis. I am. Her proper name is Isis. That's how the Greeks pronounce it. Her Egyptian name is Set, but you probably know her as Isis. Okay? Right. I'm a priestess of Isis, and when you develop a very deep bond with deity, you have a very solid relationship in the sense that you get to talk with deity.
Right.
So when I hear an evangelist tell me he's had a conversation with God, I don't begrudge him that conversation, because I've had more than my share of conversations with my deity.
Right.
Okay. Now, when he tells us my God is telling you we need to kill all the transsexuals or something, then I start wondering about who is he talking to,
Yeah, another God telling you to fly a plane into a building. That's you sure you want me to do this?
You get the drift.
Right.
All right. So when we talk about this idea of talking to our God, a lot of senior priestesses have a relationship. We're not possessed, but we can be if we tuned ourselves, and this isn't something a beginner wants to even think about doing. It's something I've been at this 44 years. And it's only something that has manifested itself in my life maybe in the last 10, where I'm a garment for a particular deity.
Right.
Okay. If that deity wants to experience our life here, they do it through me, and they see things the way I see them. Okay. Mm-hmm. And I know plenty of other people who carry an emanation of a particular deity. And there's people say, well, there's one God. I said, well, there's one consciousness out there, and the gods are subsets of all of that.
It makes sense. I mean, I can subscribe to
goddesses, talk to your Hindu friends. They'll tell you 33 million gods. It's actually much bigger than that, because they're pretty much thinking the ones associated with the Earth realm. And the Webb telescope showed us there's a lot of other realms out there.
Yeah.
But how do we want to say this? My goddess's attitude, and I quote it in my book. Stop asking us for stuff. Do it yourself. You get the same spark of life we do. Do it yourself.
Right.
Don't ask us for money. Don't ask us for a new car. Ask for us for a guidance. Ask us for guidance. Ask us for help in doing it, but don't ask us to do all the heavy lifting. Learn to do it yourself.
Unfortunately, humans are like, well, we don't want to do that. We just want it given. Well, that's the attitude.
We want to sacrifice a calf. Give it to us now.
Exactly. I'm going to burn this person at the stake. I need powers. That's the mindset of people.
And the stupid thing about it is to do sacrifice for that kind of thing. It's got to be more of your own skin than somebody else's.
Right.
That's what people don't get.
It's a very self-absorbed thing, to believe that a deity is going to give you anything. Period. Or I say this on even the people in religion I speak to. I'm like, try to imagine a huge fish tank full of ants. It's your ant farm. You love it, care for it, give it food. Now try to imagine that huge fish tank amongst billions of other fish tanks. That's the position God's in. There's no shot that it's gonna focus on one individual ant in one fish tank with billions of them. It's crazy.
Take that visualization a step further.
Larger, right? So yeah.
No. Our spark of life is one drop in an infinite ocean.
Yeah.
Okay. We are the consciousness. We are part of the consciousness. The consciousness learns things through us.
Right.
Okay. Everything we experience consciousness, it's shared in consciousness. Okay. And we're a drop of water in an infinite ocean. Okay. And that infinite ocean has other schools of fish, as they say, as you just said, and it might be Zeta Reticuli, or it might be the Pleiades, or it might be, God only know, Vulcan, or wherever,
Right.
We're connected to everybody, every when, everywhere.
Right.
And one of the lessons we keep, and remember to bring me back to contagion magic. One of the things we hear about when you talk to the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Foundation guys, the Ray Hernandez and those folks, they tell you he's had atheists get taken by ET, they come back spiritually. He's had Bible thumpers get taken by ET, they come back spiritual.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And the deal is Ray Hernandez said to me one day, and we were having a polite argument. He says, I think ET's trying to turn us all into mystics. Now think about that. We're this heavily warring culture, self-absorbed culture. And it seems like everybody who's been touched by ET has this spiritual experience.
I'll agree with you, Cheryl. There's a guy I've spoken to about a year ago now. I was interviewing him for podcasts. He's not on the podcast. He's waiting to retire before he comes on it. He's a man of science, and he wanted to disprove UFOs to his, I think it's grandson. I believe it's grandson. And for like a year, he was finding these focal groups. He was going out there doing research. And when he finally saw whatever he saw, he called everything he believed into question, even the science. He said, I believe his exact words were, is there something of a higher conscious that we're not perceiving, is how he verbed it. And so, and he made me think, I thought about that for a long time. And then I never considered that it's a higher, if to consider what consciousness is, and it's spiritual, right? And I think people too often.
Consciousness is the fabric that holds everything together.
Right. And people often associate spirituality with a religion. It's not usually the case. Spirituality is just as what it sounds like. It's spirituality. It's the energy that contains us.
They also say spirituality is, mystical, invisible guys in the sky. The smoky, the smoky, ghosty types. No. It is much more fundamental.
Sure.
And it walks in front of you every day, and most people don't see it.
It's a contained energy within ourselves.
That too. Well, contained energy in ourselves is an illusion.
That comes from a source.
Yeah, we are the source. We are pieces of the source. We're quantumly entangled with the source. The fact that we think we are an individual is an artifact of I think, therefore I am. But that in itself is an illusion.
You're right. It's got me thinking.
If you stand up and dress up in a cowboy suit and a cowboy hat and got the toy 6 guns on your hip and everything, I'm a cowboy. That's an illusion.
Right.
And who you are is an illusion. Right now you're wearing a chicken suit, but who you are is immortal. It has had millions of names, yet it has none.
That makes sense, because now if you consider that source, where your energy comes from and goes to, like I example this kid a lot in I think it was the 80s. So some kid had recollection of a previous life of him being a pilot in World War II with clarity. Right, with clarity he remembered this, right? So it tells me the energy goes back to its source. It's recycled and put back here into a new human suit in a sense, right? Or whatever living biology it is. The energy is here, it's recycled, and it's back. And then so that makes sense. It's not really, you're not really the individual. That does make sense.
When Buddha became enlightened, he had clarity to remember all of his lifetimes, even the animal lifetimes. He remembered everything. He talked to lamas, and we get to a point in our meditation that I'm a yogi. I'm an ordained yogi now. We get to a point in our meditations and our clarity and our view where we start being able to remember past lives, not necessarily a name and a street address, but when I was about third grade, I built a crossbow. I didn't know how to make a crossbow. I was in third grade, but that Swiss guy in my noggin did.
Right.
Okay. I couldn't understand how come I didn't like to be in stuffy rooms. Well, I found out later once I touched the last person I was before this lifetime. Okay. He died on a German U-boat in the Second World War.
So yeah, and I say this, and I'm glad we're saying it because I said this a lot on the podcast and even in conversations with people because I grew up Catholic.
And I did too. I went to Catholic school for 6 years.
Yeah, that was torture. So when you start dipping into reality and you consider this energy, if it has a source, it is recycled. Just like, and I use this example often. If you take your smartphone and wipe all the information off it, some of that residual data is still there. When you again the energy goes up, I think there's still some data from the life you were living, and you get recycled. And in some rare cases, you could, or if you're hyper focused anyway, you could retain some of that residual data from the previous energy's existence.
Well, it's always out there because it goes into the collective of the great consciousness,
right?
Okay, or what the remote viewers call that non-local source,
right?
Okay, now let's talk contagion magic a minute.
Yes.
Okay, you hear, if you go out there and look at a lot of books on magic, and if you get the high level books that kind of define everything for you, they talk about angel magic, they talk about different things. In the angel magic, they're like calling in angels and things like this. Again, that's like calling in gods, asking them to help you take out the garbage.
Exactly.
It just isn't the right thing. But the one most simple folk magic that you see, you'll see it in a movie about, say, voodoo. They'll get a picture of somebody and they'll start, or they'll make a
doll,
voodoo doll, and they'll stick pins in it or something like that. Well, that is a form of contagion magic. Usually what they've done is they got a drop of that person's blood and they put it on that doll, or they've got some clippings of their hair or fingernails and they put it in there. There's a connectivity relationship with the host, with the person. Okay. Now, what I discovered in my treatment is I started teaching remote viewing back in 97, 98 time frame. Okay. I learned how to do it. Went to a school for it. Dr. Courtney Brown's people, the Farsight people, farsight.org, they used to offer classes, and I think they still do. Very good classes. They're expensive, but they're good. So what happens is you're keeping in mind that you're connected to everything, everywhere, everywhere. You've got a living force inside you, if you want to call it your soul, whatever, that little drop of consciousness that's connected to everything.
Right.
All right. So if we define parameters of a when and where, we can mine information from it. And that's what remote viewers do.
Huh.
Okay. All right. So think about that. If I take a 3x5 card and I write, visit Neil Armstrong on the moon, July 20, 1969, rather. Okay. Stiff in an envelope. You put a serial number on the outside. Now, you're not going to do the remote viewing, but your class is. All they get is that little 8-digit number on the outside of it. Okay.
Right.
Now, I used to have my wife, her interns used to stuff a bag for me. We'd give them a box of envelopes, a big box of 1,000 envelopes, and they'd cut out clippings in the newspaper. They'd take pictures with their cell phones and print them out, whatever, and they'd stuff them in these envelopes. And then another intern had no idea what was in the envelopes, just put these random serial numbers using a random number generator on the computer on the outside, threw them all in a big bag. I got one over in the closet. It's got about 150 envelopes in it right now. Couple of other people stuff for me. Okay. I have no idea what's in there. Now, there's about 10 cards I gave them to put in envelopes, but I have no idea what envelope they're in. Okay, these are cards I always use for training purposes. One is the base on the backside of the moon. One is the Titanic where it is now. One is Neil Armstrong and the moon, that kind of thing. Okay. So a remote viewer, it's, you see people are supposedly, sitting there with a crystal ball and everything. Well, the crystal ball is really focused. It's not magical in itself.
Right.
And what they're doing is they're quieting their mind to the point where they're making a connection with something. Now, what remote viewing did was take it a step further and use a very structured form of data mining by asking you a series of everly more complex questions about the target. Your data mining is all you're doing.
Right.
Okay, when you're going to the seer, people are asking him or her questions, and hopefully they can give it back to you when something is meaningful to you. When we do it with remote viewing, because of the structured way of seeing it, we pick up bits and pieces of what that target is. Okay, whether we know about what, we don't know what it is. So when people have gone to the backside of the moon, usually the students put their pen down at the end of the session, and almost invariably, someone might say, if not two people, will say they have no idea what the target is. And they'll say, well, whoever those people were, they didn't want us there.
Huh.
Okay.
Right.
I had a student a long time ago. She said, I can't do this. People, the New Age community would have you believe on the web. Okay. Oh, it's big, colorful visions. You can go anywhere. Baloney. It's like trying to see a cow through a bucket of mud. Okay. Right. And you got your eyes closed. You're trying to, somebody has read off some numbers to you, and now they're asking you questions about the target. Remember what I said about the karate teacher? No, K-N-O-W. Instead of experiencing something, I'm picking up this threaded nut here on the table. Okay, I just experience it. I'm holding it here in my fingers. I can feel the threads, all that stuff. That's knowing it by experiencing it. Remote viewing is knowing it by knowing it.
Right.
Okay. All right. So this one student says to me, she throws her pen down. She says, I can't do this. He said, what was your impression? Clowns running around with an American flag, jumping around, hopping around. And what did the video look like of the astronauts on the moon? Guys with an American flag hopping around like a bunch of clown suits.
That's true, actually. Yeah. Okay.
She did another target with me a week or so later. And again, she threw her pen down. I can't do this. She's screaming at me. She's a doctor now. And she looked at me and says, I said, what was your impression? She says, jumping white broccoli. Okay. Now, she let her conscious mind color it. Okay.
Right.
That's what happened. Jumping white broccoli. There was a photograph in the envelope, and it was a nicely haired, I don't know the proper term for groomed, a nicely groomed French poodle.
Ah.
And he looked like broccoli, white broccoli. Okay. You get an idea what people are seeing. This is the data, the material they're mining. And remote viewing has gotten to the point where, with a lot of expertise, a lot of practice, and a lot of quieting your mind, there was one famous one where an intelligence agency wanted to test some of the guys at the Stargate program. Okay. So they had an envelope that had a picture in it, and it was like stuffed in it was like 3 or 4 times blind removed. Okay. And it was a photograph of an aircraft hangar. Not even what was in the aircraft hangar. And the remote viewing was this Army Master Sergeant. He meditated in a little dome tent out in one of their sheds, came in and did it. Okay. And he literally, what it turned out to be, it was before the Abrams tank, anybody knew that there was an Abrams tank in development. There was one parked in this aircraft hangar. And he drew it. He drew the computerized control panel in the thing in great detail.
Wow.
The problem was he did it left to right. He was literally looking at it sort of through it. So the intelligence agency critics were saying, okay, you got the tank, a tank in this thing 4 envelopes down, and you drew the computerized control panel, but you drew it backwards.
He saw it as a mirror effect.
He saw a mirror effect. Okay. Huh. And exactly. He saw a mirror effect. So, they were all critical about it. You didn't get it exactly perfect. And it's just nothing's exactly perfect. Look how he did it, for God's sakes. There was another event in remote viewing. Now, I go back to Contagion Magic momentarily. This one guy, they gave him a target, and it turned out to be a lat longitude, right? And it turned out to be a Soviet base. Okay. Out in the Urals, I believe. And they got in there, and he drew the thing, and he drew this particular aspect of the base very accurately. So, you know what kind of, these overhead cranes just look like a couple of I-beams, that kind of thing,
right? Like
a factory crane,
right?
Okay, he drew an overhead crane, and the defense analyst at one of the agencies said, well, that doesn't exist. He got the rest of it. They said, yeah, it's very accurate, but those cranes don't exist. 2 months later, they did.
Yeah. With that, when people, in my mind anyway, when you're remote viewing and you're utilizing that kind of focus, when you dream, you see yourself in a third person, or you see from a third person perspective, like as you would in life, right? But sometimes you have a dream on a rare occasion and I notice, because I've had a few dreams where you see yourself from third party away. And typically, from what I recall, and that's why I write down stuff like, this dream made no sense.
Good. Keep a dream journal.
Yeah. And so I wrote down one day, and I noticed that whenever I see myself from a third person perspective, maybe it's just me, I always see myself in a mirror effect. Like, it's bizarre. Like in the watch, like and the only reason is in the one dream, I wear a watch. I wear it religiously. It's my Garmin Venue 2. In the dream, it was on my right arm. And when I woke up, I'm like, well, why was it on my right arm? Should I change it? I instead of taking this like a suggestion, I realized, I was like, maybe I'm just seeing myself in a mirror effect. And I said that about a year ago, actually. So when you said that, and he's seeing this in a mirror effect, when you're, in my mind, and I have no background in this, no science to it, nothing. But in my mind, when you leave your body, whether it be to astral project or to go visualize like another planet, I don't think that energy is operating in the same space time that we are currently.
No, it's not.
Right. So, and I said this before, like what if you do remote viewing and you don't realize it, but you went back 30 years. And so you're like, well, I don't recognize any of this shit. Why am I even here? Or you go to the future and you don't recognize things, because I don't think it works in the same wavelength.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. You're not thinking in the same context that you are in your conscious mind.
Right.
Context is a problem. You said something a moment ago about the idea of astral projection. Okay, astral projection. Let's clear up a piece of misunderstanding about astral projection. A lot of people say, "Oh, I leave my body." No, I learned in the monastery. You leave your body, you die.
Right.
Okay. What you're doing is you're shifting your consciousness to a different point in time and space.
Right.
Okay. So, and people say, what do you mean? I said, well, you got a TV set there plugged into the internet. You got streaming, you got 1,000 channels. You're shifting your consciousness. You're shifting that. Your head is like that TV set, and you're shifting yourself to a different point of someplace else.
Right. You're streaming what it is that your mind's projecting.
Right. Now, I tell my magical students, there's a lot of people in the witchcraft community who will say to you, I tell them there is a temporal component. You have to take a temporal component, a temporal aspect in mind if you're practicing magic. A lot of people in the witchcraft community blow remote viewing off because they have some prejudice against the military, and because the military developed it must be evil.
Right.
Okay. So they blow the whole thing off. But I teach my students there is a temporal and a karmic component to everything we do, both in a divining context and also in an active projecting magic standpoint. Okay. Somebody said, well, I know somebody who wanted something, I will say a motorcycle. Okay. And she worked a spell for the better part of a year to get this particular type of motorcycle. Didn't happen in the near future. 2 or 3 years later, somebody passed away and willed her that style of motorcycle
Right.
that he had in his garage.
So the information was put in the universe, and the universe replied, maybe not at the time you liked, but ultimately it found the universe recognized a pattern that would suit you.
But you wouldn't believe how many people come up to me and say, well, I tell them magic is for the long haul.
Right. Well,
I need it by next Tuesday. Then you shouldn't be practicing magic.
Right. That's
it comes in its own time and season.
Okay. I guess a better way to say that to people is success comes with the long haul, right? Like a podcast. I started a podcast. Right? You can't expect within a year or two that you're just going to take off. You got to build yourself. It's going to take time, right?
Yeah.
And in summary, like in summary with this, to simplify it down to the simplest words, the human brain, and I'm conveying this to meditation, magic, and everything. The human brain is a supercomputer. And if you want to utilize it at the highest level, it's going to take a lot of practice and a lot of time, and you got to clear up the mental traffic, and you got to believe in not just what you're doing, but in yourself. You have to be symbiotic with your consciousness, both sub and waking. You have to.
Do you know how many students I've had to throw out of class in the first week or two because they weren't willing to sit down and play with a lump of Play-Doh or a box of Legos?
Wow. It's
because you have to have that playful, you have to have that flexibility, that creativeness, that almost, you have to approach mysticism and magic, that type of all the stuff that goes with it, with the innocent mind of a child.
I know a guy that specials in human biology, right? That's his specialty. You know what he does when he's thinking? He doodles. He doodles and draws and colors.
Yeah.
That's where he gets his clarity from.
Now, let's go to contagion magic again.
Yep.
So in the movie, you see somebody stick a pin in a picture or something like this, for the guy. Well, actually, think about that from that context of remote viewing. I get requests all the time. Oh, will you please play for our grandmother, our uncle who's in the hospital in ICU?
Right.
Well, if I don't have we've all got that little finger and finger hookup connection, but if I don't have a closer connection, it's really hard. And I've had people call me up saying, hey, you've got a coven. Could you guys do a working for, uncle or aunt so-and-so? Yeah, but we don't know her. Are you willing to come over and be in our circle with us to give us the blood connection? As a member of her family,
right.
It's a channel back into her that we don't have. You'd be surprised how many people won't do that.
It's crazy because people, they want...
let me tell you the mechanic here. This is the mechanic that I'm trying to get to. I said, guys, I've told some of my magic friends, I said, look, get somebody to go up into ICU and take a picture with their phone. I don't want a picture of her 5 years ago. I want a picture of her 25 minutes ago.
Right.
Go take a picture of your phone, bring it back. We print it out. We stuff it in an envelope. We put a serial number on the thing, and we put it out. We put it up on the internet. We say to all our witch friends and say, "Would you please for the next hour project healing energy to this serial number?"
Huh.
One, I don't tell them who it is or what it is. I just tell them it's a sick human being who needs our help. Please project the energy there. Okay. The technique still works. The remote viewing technique goes both ways.
Huh.
It's funny. You wouldn't believe how many people who study witchcraft only want to do active magic and they refuse to study divining, which is half the battle. So in my book, I said, forget trying to work active magic. Learn how to quiet your mind and divine and do remote viewing or something like that first. Then you can do the active magic because you've already quieted yourself and you've got that connection with everything.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I'll tell you why.
We teach magic, and I quite literally say it in the book. We teach magic ass backwards.
You're right. Because, when I did the little circles of questions of people, like, what would you want to know about magic? It was all self-serving, the questions. Every one of them was a self-serving question. None of them ever stated, clarity of mind or peace.
Oh, they want abundance. They want, I want this, I want that. They think it's a vending machine. And I tell them, first thing I tell them right off the bat, magic is not a vending machine.
You know what the number 2 question was, right? That I got?
No.
Love. Love. Was it like, how do I make someone fall in love with me or or find it, etc.? And all I can think is like, if I'm asking you about magic, that could, for my mind, if someone came to me,
that's binding magic.
Right. If I met someone, they're like, hey, I could do magic. Like, all right, well, let's end war. Let's find peace. Let's end racism. These are the things that come forward in my mind.
Okay.
It's crazy.
So can I tell you that, and I get laughed at all the time by all these wannabes.
Good.
I tell them, look, there is blowback. There is karma. You have to pay attention to temporal considerations when you're casting a spell. Okay?
Right.
All right. Now, what kind of spells do you work, Cheryl? I do something I learned in the Buddhist monastery called bodhicitta, raising the great bodhicitta, or in English language, raising the great blessing. I take myself out of the magical formula and I do a bright blessing spell of abundance and healing and well-being and cuddly love to all beings everywhere, everywhere.
Right. As it should.
When I used to be in a circle, we go around before the circle. I used to go to this one priestess's house for her moon circles, and she'd have 35 or 40 people in her cellar. And we going around, does anybody have any special intentions? And everybody was going around, well, my cat needs surgery on its hip. My aunt is going in the hospital in ICU. And it goes to the next person. And it goes around, like every time you're going around, it was always this tiny little focus thing. And they were trying to spoon the magic out by the spoonful.
Yeah.
And I usually sat at the end of that circle. And by the time they got done with all the intentions, I would simply say, I make this offering for every being, everywhere, every when. And people's jaws drop because they're so busy shelling it out like it's the most precious little, there's only a little bit here. We'd have to give it. No, there's all of it. It's there. Utilize it. So I make the offering for every being, a blessings offering for every being, everywhere, every when, bright abundance, loving kindness, everything nice.
It's weird. I read a book a long time ago.
There's blowback.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
and what's the blowback? It's positive. And all that abundance, all these other people are working their ass off trying to get out of magic. It comes to you anyway when you get the blowback.
Right. I read a book a long time ago.
And non-self-serving.
As a kid, I read this book, Cheryl, and it was not. I think it was fiction. And in the book, this guy's there, and he's. Long story short, they're on this island, and he makes grain. He's like, we got to survive. He's making grain. He's making food, and his brother's like, what are we going to charge these people for food? He's like, no, we're not going to charge them. We're going to feed everyone because ultimately they're going to build things, become doctors. We're going to need their services, right? And I guess the book, what it tried to do was show how a society should function, where there wasn't a currency. They're on this island. They're stranded. They build up. They have food. And sure enough, one guy gets sick. One of the guys is a healer. One guy wants to learn something. There's someone that teaches. And so they learned how to take care of one another,
Yeah.
And I think, so humanity's lost sight of that. No question. Because in today's day and age, it doesn't matter. Currency rules right now. It rules us right now.
Over the weekend. I'll go there a step further with you.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Okay. This is going to be my last statement. I've got.
Yeah. We'll close out.
My timer's going here. We were having a Halloween party here in our apartment complex. Okay. 150 people were showing up at this thing. Okay. And they had the part of the party room booked. Huge place. Okay. We can hold almost 200 people. And they had a magician in there doing things and everything. I took what they call the comfy part, which has all the big overstuffed chairs and everything,
Right.
And I took that and I sat in there with one of my vestments, and I offered free tarot card readings, free 10-minute tarot card readings. Okay. And I had all these people say, well, why aren't you charging for it? You should charge for it. Okay. I had 12 tarot card readings that I did that night from persons from 90 to 9. Okay. And I did them for free. Okay. Asked for nothing for myself. But different people that I read for, half an hour later, they'd come back and they stuffed something underneath something I had on my desk. And the thing I got done with the night, and I had like $20 worth of tips in there.
Yeah.
Okay. That bought a ham today. So we can, I said, there's the offering. I'm going to buy a ham. I bought a nice, sliced ham, for that, So it comes back to you. I used to read in DC back in the days when people called me Lady Cassandra. I was plugged into two of the FM radio stations. Remember, I was also in radio other than my daytime job. Okay.
Right.
And I had called the producer and I'd say, hey, Lady Cassandra is going to be at the Station Grill at Union Station. It's a pub in the Union Station. And she's going to read tarot cards for benefit for Kids Hospital. Okay.
Right.
So I'd show up over there in my Lady Cassandra outfit, and the bartender would put a big brandy sniffer on the table, and I'd sit over there in a corner booth and I'd read tarot cards for 3 or 4 hours for free. And the reading was good or something like that. People were stuffing, whatever. I said, it's just a donation. It's going to go to Kid Hospital. At the end of the night, I probably have read for maybe 15, 20 people. I've got $200 to $300 in that brandy sniffer to send to Kids Hospital.
Huh.
I ask for nothing for myself, but I always seem to have the resources to do things.
Right. Because at some point, the universal energy recognizes there's a circle there that has a positive effect.
It comes back to you. It comes back to you. Yes.
Anyhow, Cheryl, we had a great conversation. The Magical Musings.
It's fun, Adam.
Yeah, the Magical Musing of the Rogue Witch, I'll have in description so people could find
Amazon.
it. Amazon.
Magical Musings of a Rogue Witch, available on Amazon. If you put in the book search on Amazon, if you put in Cheryl Costa Witch, you'll get the book.
Yeah, and I'll have the link in description so people can find it with ease. Anyone listening right now, we're going to say good night, good evening, good day, whatever it is for you, and I'm going to talk to Cheryl in post.
Okay, and by the way, one last thing.
Sure.
I'll let you know when the first 5 or 10 books are up on Amazon of the individual state books.
Oh, good. And I'll start adding them too. I'll keep the links going.
Please.
Indeed. Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you.